Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing Summerween series, celebrating hot weather and horror movies by bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of the Arctic Circle.
In this episode, we'll be talking about Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein. We are first going to talk about Frankenstein as the quintessential Faust retelling, and we'll be talking about how this adaptation specifically significantly deepens that relationship. We'll also be talking about the kaleidoscopic structure of this movie, along with its distinctive visual style and startling creature design. Let's get into it.
All right, so here we go. Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein. We've been looking forward to this for so long.
I was going to say, the hype was high. We were a little nervous, actually, going in.
And props to Netflix. I've never said that before. Props to Netflix.
I was like, what?
For having a 3-week theatrical rollout for this movie.
Seriously.
And that's why we're rushing the release of this episode. We're rushing the release of this episode.
You've done a lot of work, Cam, and I really appreciate it.
I have. It's been a busy week. We have a doozy of an episode on Friday, by the way, as the grand finale of our Summerween coverage.
It's our Halloween special. It's gonna be so good.
But we couldn't wait because,
No.
and we might have different takes on this. So I don't want to. What is it? Over my skis?
What?
Over my skis?
Trip over your skis?
No, there's a thing there.
Is it ski over your skis?
What an intro this has been.
Is it paint over your skis? Cam, if y'all don't know, Cam was secretly born in 1945, and he is full of old people idioms that I've never heard in my entire life. And I'm older than Cam. I don't know where you get these. I don't know where you grew up, but it wasn't in millennial 90s the way that everybody else did.
So we're releasing this episode immediately because if you can, I think you should see this in theaters. It will be that much more grandiose and majestic and wonderful an experience. But even if you don't catch it in theaters and you just watch it at home, I had a fantastic time with this.
Me too.
To the point where I had to start writing some notes during the movie.
It was very, very sweet. You don't usually do that.
No,
we go to Alamo Draft House, of course, and they have the little order cards where you can write down what you want to order. But Cam uses it to take notes instead, and it's very charming.
I just had to. And this is one of those episodes where I have to go ham on Faustus because Del Toro did, and I'm following in those footsteps. So I want to jump right into that before we get to some of the other elements of the film.
Let's do it. By the way, we're going to spoil this movie, but it's a 200-year-old story, so keep up.
That's on you.
That's on you.
So yes, I have said this since the very beginning of our Faustus coverage, which has always been in the context of some other work of art that we're talking about. And I've always said along the way that Frankenstein is one of the kind of feathers in the cap of the Faustus retellings. I think that is maybe one of the most successful Faust fables, to use the terminology that we created here. And I want to unpack that a little because I've always said that, but we've never had time to really explore what that means. So I wanted to just explain for a second why I think Frankenstein is absolutely and almost inarguably a Faust retelling.
That sounds great because I can on its face kind of understand Victor Frankenstein is making this pretty horrible deal with, if not the devil, then God in trying to recreate life, and then he's damned for it. But what else is there? I'm curious.
And but I'm glad to get that perspective because I do think there is something accessible and approachable and almost instantly recognizable from the premise of this story where Victor Frankenstein feels evocative. He feels very similar to Faustus, where he's a gifted professional or academic. Different adaptations show him at different ages. This film makes him a little older than usual, maybe, but I mean, that only strengthens the Faustus framing.
Sure. I always see him as pretty young, and I think in the book he's pretty young, but we see him at all sorts of ages and all sorts of adaptations.
And the age almost doesn't matter.
He's kind of an ageless character, as far as I remember. It's been a long time since I read the book, by the way, listener. I read it, in college, which was a long time ago.
If you haven't read Frankenstein, Dan Stevens from Downton Abbey and a bunch of other things, he does a fantastic audiobook performance of Frankenstein.
Audiobook. Yeah, I love that version.
So Victor and Faustus are both gifted professionals. They're both incredibly talented academics seeking more, seeking this kind of profane power. They're playing God. These are all both of these stories are described as fables about arrogance.
I was going to say, you need more than heavenly power permits.
Exactly.
Is that what's going on?
Look at you. But this is the monkey wrench. So in the basic setup, you have a very Faustian character. But the monkey wrench is that the act of creation, where Victor Frankenstein creates life from these dead bodies, that jumbles up all of the roles that should be simple.
Okay.
Because the act of creation is very different from the act of summoning.
True.
Faustus summons a demon. Victor Frankenstein creates the creature. So you have Victor as this, what we thought was a Faustian almost caricature, suddenly swapped into a different position. Because now when you view the creature right after he's birthed or created or electrocuted or whatever you want to say, he enters the picture as a Faustus.
I see.
I mean, literally in this one, he's chained up in the basement. So he feels like the Faustus, where he is powerless under the thrall of this increasingly demonic force. And because he's chained up, it seems like he's going to be there for the rest of his life.
I see. So like our Faustus becomes the demon here. He becomes the overarching demonic force.
Right.
Or evil force, if you want to make it easier.
Oh, it's totally.
Yeah.
Victor becomes a Mephistopheles. At the same moment, he was just a Faustus. Now he's elevated to this role of master, creator, tyrant.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, because when you compare those two acts, like, yes, they're very similar. But I mean, if we want to look at sort of the plausibility of both of these things, I think the plausibility of a guy summoning a demon is much higher than a guy creating life. Like the fact that Victor Frankenstein achieves this is so incredible, is so overpowered that I know what you're saying.
They're both impossible actions, but I think there's much more of a shuffling effect in how it's deployed in Frankenstein.
Yes.
Because at once you have Victor, who you meet as a Faustus. When the creature comes into the picture, Victor suddenly also becomes a Mephistopheles. And then you start thinking about the creature as the Faustus. But at the same time, the creature is obviously also a Mephistopheles because he is the supernatural creature. Right. He would be the allegory to the demon. He's this undead man. He is the mythical supernatural object here. He's the creature. He's the proof that there is something else, in the same way the demon was proof of Christianity, proof beyond what man should ever be able to actually prove. It's the same thing for Victor, where when he has this thing in the basement, this is proof that he was right, that all of his theories were correct, that the world of science will be turned on its ear.
And I think there's a question of, or an element of agency too, right? Because Faustus chooses to summon a demon. Mephistopheles does not choose to be summoned, in the same way that the creature does not choose to be created, but yet he's become the Faustus who has no choice in anything that happens.
That's fantastic. Yes, because Mary Shelley does something really smart here, where she skips over the contract. And just that one little difference between summoning and creating. You're right. It completely removes agency from the equation.
And it almost feels like, maybe you'll get into this, but it almost feels like the contract is sort of worked out between the two of them over the course of the whole story.
I didn't even have that in the notes, but I think that's an interesting way to view the rest of how they negotiate this relationship, because they're always both uneasily occupying both roles. They're both Mephistopheles and Faustus all the time, and you have this kind of double vision through the rest of the story.
And they're constantly discussing and on their own questioning, what is this? How do we survive this? What am I meant to do? How am I meant to respond to this other thing? What is our relationship? Do we love each other? Do we hate each other? Do we try to kill each other? Do we try to kill ourselves? And they're always trying to work it out, and I don't think they ever really come to a good conclusion.
And this is why I've always loved the novel so much, and why, I just explained why I think it's a Faust fable, but to just talk about why it's such a good novel for a second, it's because it is so playful with these central roles. When I talk about Faustus and Mephistopheles, I'm talking about character archetypes. I'm talking about the duo that I think is core to all great storytelling. They're basically just shorthands. They're labels for a dynamic that I think is so timeless and irresistible for audiences. But the thing that Frankenstein as a book does so well is the constant reversals and power plays throughout its runtime, where you play with all of these pairings, these titles, these master-servant, predator-prey, creator-creation, father-son, hunter-hunted, who's the monster, who's the demon, who's the human. It's all of these questions, and I don't think there's any point in the film where there's an answer to those questions.
I agree. I think the whole story feels like a meditation or a questioning, and less of a definitive statement about anything. I agree. That's one of the reasons I like it so much, because it's contemplative. It's not meandering. It's got direction, but it just encourages you to think about all these constant reversals, and playful, I think, is a good adjective to describe this. Yeah.
And if you look at the book historically, it's almost the sci-fi Faustus. Largely, Frankenstein is credited as being the first science fiction story.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting how that evolves the Faustian myth, because you're able to make literal all of these transformations, all of these role reversals and power plays. You're able to physicalize all of them within the story via this body horror. These characters who are all of these mashed together dualities, the fact that one of them is kind of broken down and mutilated through the film, and the other one is made up of broken, mutilated bodies, this sort of duo, this duality, is built into absolutely every single level of this story.
Absolutely. A quick sidebar. The fact that I like that you point out how Victor Frankenstein's body is mangled over the course of the story. It certainly happens in this movie. I don't remember. Does that, him like losing a leg and stuff, does that happen in the book?
I don't believe it's to that extent. I don't think by the story they're both kind of loping through the Arctic, but I think that visually that works so well to foreground these metaphors and similarities for the audience.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I've been listening back to the audiobook just to refamiliarize myself with the story, and I'm not very far in. But at the beginning, when these people on this ship in the Arctic meet Victor, he does seem really weary and broken down, but they don't mention like a missing limb or anything like that. So I was curious how much of that was Guillermo del Toro's sort of interpretive choice, but I think it's a great one. I think it contributes to this idea.
Well, I think you can tell, from the first scene of this movie that Del Toro has a rapturous knowledge, respect, and reverence for this source material.
100%.
Which means that I trust him. And it means that, and there are plenty of divergences from the original text, but they all feel inspired. I think it's because he's trying to explore this story from new and interesting angles to expose underlying patterns and similarities and contradictions. It's all him testing the source material, but it very clearly comes from a place of love.
Yes, it's in the spirit of the story and rather than a correcting of the story.
And that's the thing. I mean, we talk about adaptations, and I think that gets shorthanded in the cultural conversation where if you change anything, it's a bad adaptation.
Right.
And I
think
think
so unfair.
this film disproves that argument for the reasons we just laid out. So that's my argument for why Frankenstein is and always has been the ultimate Faust fable.
Love it.
Now I want to talk about this adaptation and how it so significantly deepens that relationship. This adaptation is somehow even more dynamic in how it doubles and quadruples down on these roles and these reversals and these dualities, these coexistences. There's a compounding factor that happens here. So I have some examples. The first one is the blind man, who's, I believe, some sort of farmer. We're going to call him the blind farmer.
Sure.
And he's played by Filch from Harry Potter, or what's his name from Game of Thrones?
Frey.
Walder Frey.
He's
David
so
Bradley.
good.
Fantastic performance. So the blind farmer, who is called the old man within this movie.
Awesome.
He is, and I've talked about
Shakespearean old man,
but also there's my favorite old man of Elizabethan theater is the one in Doctor Faustus.
Oh, of course. Yes.
There is the old man archetype who exists there, who is the voice of reason, the kind of moment of clarity, usually, for the Faustus character. Sorry, I don't know what that was. I guess I aged like 80 years in half a sentence.
You became the old man.
I did. That was method acting. But that voice of reason, that old man archetype, is always doomed. He can't be successful. The Faustus character can't escape the fate and the contract of what he's done to himself. But here, I love what Del Toro does with this character in this role, which, yes, was popular in Elizabethan theater, but I think is immortal and relatable and useful for audiences of any age. He makes him an unusually direct father figure in a movie that is full of father figures.
Yes.
And he does this through the creature's kind of narrated meditations as he's in the, garage. What's the word for that? He's in like this workshop hiding, watching this family. And he's thinking about family. And then when the younger relations go off, he develops this relationship with the old man. And you get that sort of fatherly relationship. The way that Del Toro makes all of this work visually, makes all of it work cinematically with the spirit of the forest mantle, which I think ultimately can apply to both Victor and the creature, because he gives you a whole third act stretch where they're hunting each other through the woods.
Oh, sure.
So I think even this title that should only apply to the creature, ultimately he doubles back and makes sure that it applies to Victor as well.
Well, I like that too, because Spirit of the Forest sounds so mythical, and of course the creature is this mythical thing that's that exists impossibly. But like I sort of hinted before, the act that Victor commits in creating life makes him himself mythical too. So I think that makes perfect sense.
And it also makes him a father. He just happens to be a pretty bad one. So
right.
Here you get another contrast that serves that relationship between Victor and the creature, between the Faustus and the Mephistopheles part of both of these men, where the creature gets this chance to briefly have a good father with the blind man, the farmer, in the house. And you see with that hug at the end, that's absolutely him trying to fill that void in the middle of him. Contrast the blind farmer. Sorry, that was a little,
Freudian slip there.
Well, I mean, there's so much. Again, I could argue that every single man in this movie is a father figure.
Yeah, of course.
But contrast the blind farmer and the role that we've just discussed him playing with Victor's father. And this is another interesting departure from the source material, because Victor's father in the book is kind of a non-entity, and he's certainly not villainous and tyrannical in the way that Charles Dance brings him to life.
He's so good at playing a mean dad.
He's great. He's absolutely fantastic here. But he's given new prominence in the plot, and specifically in the arc of Victor, and he is the villain origin story for Victor. It's another bad or absent father who forms this broken central dynamic of the movie. I love that it's not just about the central father and son anymore. That it's not just about, is Victor a bad dad to the creature? They're both seeking new fathers. They're both in new relationships as sons. We're constantly doubling back, going forward, and seeing more kind of fractal views of both of these characters.
Right, and I think it's interesting that Victor's relationship with Christoph Waltz's character, whose name escapes me.
Harlander, we're about to get there.
Thank you. The fact that maybe you'll get into it, but the fact that sort of crumbles as Victor becomes a father is, I think, really telling. He kind of tries to do it again by, having this connection with Harlander, you said? That's too many syllables. Cut one. By having this relationship with Harlander, that fails. And then he sort of, directly after that is when he becomes a father and does a really bad job at it. So
I think you could argue that their relationship with every father figure in the movie ultimately fails. The relationship with Harlander fails when he's murdered. The relationship with the blind farmer fails when he dies. The relationship with Victor's father fails with that ultimatum and then him dying. And I think you could even argue, because so much of the movie is spent exploring these characters as sons. And I really love the way Del Toro twists the framing device to make it almost a double interview. The way that the ship captain talks to both of them, he almost feels like a referee. Like, these guys have been fighting forever and they haven't just talked it out. So now they need an objective third party to referee them and make them hash it out and shake hands and make up. I
mean, kind of like a dad, wrangling his two sons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he becomes this kind of mutual father figure, an objective figure for both of them. So often I was tempted while watching this to just view these guys as sons. But if we look at all of these father figures and go back to the Faustian framing, the father is usually the Mephistopheles role. He's the one who has the power.
Yes.
He's the one creating the terms of the contract. And you could say that, 24 years of service is the same as, I don't know, in American parlance, it would be like 18 years under my roof.
Right. How long you have to be a father.
There's so much
or have
of that.
to be a child underneath your father. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So if there are a ton of father figures throughout this movie, that means within the Faustian framing, there's a mess of Mephistopheles. They're everywhere. They're in every scene of the movie, which almost frames Victor and the creature as twin Faustuses, who are victims of all of these cruel masters, or victims of losing these good father figures, but that they are sons constantly battered and bruised by these fathers passing through the story. But this is, I think, the masterstroke of how Del Toro is viewing these characters, because it's so much more than that. In the half of the movie that he doesn't spend viewing these characters as Faustuses who are shaped by these Mephistophelian father figures, he's looking at how Victor and the creature are fathers in their own right. So when we see, after the birth of the creature, when he's chained up in the basement, we see Victor with these tools and whips and the way he's hurting him and yelling at him. We see Victor explicitly as a really bad father.
Yeah.
And in the flashbacks, when baby Victor was with his dad, you saw the dad hitting him with a stick. Charles Dance was beating him with this little cane when he didn't remember all the medical facts.
Yeah.
And now he's there with a cane, being mean and beating the creatures. You see him becoming his father. You see how that cruel parenting brutalizes and shapes that newborn creature. But then you also see the creature flirting with the idea of becoming a father. Because part of his request for a bride, when they finally have that moment that you've been waiting for from the book, the way that Victor objects to it is by teasing out the hypothetical of, what would happen after I made you a wife? Would I have to make you kids? Would you try to procreate with the bride?
Death begets death begets death.
And the way he talks about procreation is with such, I feel like it's the most venomous. It's the most disgust that he shows throughout the movie.
Yes.
When the creature is at his most vulnerable. So it's this absolute cruelty around this discussion of fatherhood. So it feels like Del Toro is suggesting that all Mephistopheles were once Faustuses as well. And that even more scarily, maybe they still are. And I think this is where this is such an incredible achievement in the Faustian history and myth-making of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I think Del Toro is positing this ultimate duality and coexistence of identities. That yes, both of these guys at all times somehow can be Faustus and Mephistopheles. This contradiction shouldn't exist, can't exist, but it just does. In every scene of this 2.5-hour movie, they're both in both roles. And we see them evolve and grapple with these identities, but never really resolve them. It's incredible that as Victor is about to create life, he's been introduced to us as this ultimate Faustian character. The moment he creates life, fatherhood, being
Yes.
right there,
Yes.
he becomes a Mephistopheles to the creature. So we're introduced to him as a clean Faustus, and then the inciting incident happens and he becomes the ultimate Mephistopheles.
Yeah.
He gives us the tools to grapple with this almost immediately. But then we start throwing in father figures and see how that complicates it. Harlander, who's played by Christoph Waltz, when he's offering to be Victor's patron, to give him this blank check to pursue all of these experiments, which will ultimately result in the creature being born. When Victor finally accepts it and shakes his hand, Harlander looks at him and says, "A bargain has been struck."
Oh, cool. I missed that.
That was the moment where I picked up the pen and started
Just
writing.
everything clicked in.
I mean,
He's locking in.
He uses the word bargain.
That's
and
great. That's great.
It's such a beautiful and sensitive and informed, it's such a thoughtful script. He's not using the word bargain accidentally. That felt like one of those moments that was a nod to the Faustian history of this story, and maybe specifically a nod to me. It just made me so happy.
Well, I think it's also interesting that, in the Faust story, he is damned because he sells his soul. He summons this demon and signs the contract and chooses to give over his soul. Here, in creating life, you can say that Victor has certainly damned himself. But I think even before then, him, I mean, it's not a fully intentional thing, but it's very much his fault. Him killing Harlander is really what damns him. And so the fact that he's already done that when he then creates life, I think is not insignificant.
Right. And by the time the creature is born, Victor's identity is already endlessly complicated.
Yeah, he's already killed his second father figure, and it's all messy there.
Summoning this otherworldly being, which I guess would be the creature or the Mephistopheles, should be the ultimate Faustian moment. But right before that happens, with this handshake deal with Harlander, he's acting as the Mephistopheles, and then suddenly he also has a Mephistopheles. So Harlander is the Mephistopheles is Mephistopheles.
Right.
We're doubling, we're tripling,
Exactly.
we're experimenting with these roles.
And this happens with some other people too. There's a lot of doubling. I mean, and I love this fixation on duality. It's totally present. The biggest thing I noticed was the double casting of Mia Goth, playing Victor's mother in the past, and then also playing his pseudo love interest in the present. And that's obviously intentional, right? And part of that, you could read that as an Oedipal thing, and, you know, Victor struggling with him loving and losing his mother so young and it being his father's fault. And now he's trying to sort of reclaim his mother in a new way. But also it's I think it's not just about that. It's also about duality and the complex roles that all these people take on. Because if you think about Mia Goth's character playing, Elizabeth, is that her name? She's basically his brother's fiance. Her relationship with the creature is interesting because you can look at it as romantic, but you can also look at it as almost maternal. Like, she also wants to take care of the creature. And,
a newborn chained up in the basement.
Right, and be a parent in the way that Victor is not. So there's this constant reshuffling and doubling and quadrupling of these different roles throughout all of these characters.
And we're almost holding her as the bride. We're almost holding her at arm's length here, because in the book, she is a love interest for Victor. But here, she's a love interest for Victor's brother. So she's almost equally distant from Victor as she is from the creature. She exists very neatly in the middle of them.
Well, also in the book, I believe she's his like stepsister. Like, not necessarily. They grow
Really?
up. They grow up together. She's not his stepsister, but like one of them is a ward or something. They grow up together. Like, and like back then, that's not that weird, I guess. But still, like, I mean, the same thing happens in like Jane Austen's Emma and that sort of thing. But the fact,
and Game of Thrones.
the fact that Elizabeth can. That Elizabeth can take on this sort of sisterly role. I mean, because even in this movie, if she's going to be his sister-in-law, that's a sister role. So she can duel as his sister and mother and love interest and all these things all at once. So, yeah.
So in the same way, every man is a father figure. Every woman is kind of maternal. And there is as much Freudian subtext in the one as there is in the other.
Right.
But I think there's almost a tip of the hat or a suggestion here that both characters, Victor and the creature, are so overwhelmed by these collapsing, doubling identities
Yes.
that they kind of don't know how to think about other people. Because the relationship with the bride should be kind of simple. I was expecting it to be an affair, right, between Victor and Mia Goth, or Elizabeth.
Yes.
And it wasn't that simple at all. In the same way, it wasn't a simple love story or affair with the creature. And I was really taken by when the creature approaches Victor the first time and says, "Can you make me," the character we come to think of as the bride, he doesn't say a wife. He doesn't say spouse. He says companion.
Right, which I would first think means like a friend. And so I would think another male, perhaps. And so it's interesting that Victor jumps immediately to, oh, you want a bride, you know?
I think it also speaks to the fact that neither of these two men can understand the world outside of their dynamic, because they are unwilling companions stuck in this tension until one of them destroys the other.
Well, and of course, Victor also can't have a bride either. He can't have the woman that he wants, right? So they're both sort of confused and lacking this thing, but don't quite know how to define it or pursue it. Because Victor, you see him kind of trying to declare his love for Elizabeth, but he also knows that it can't happen, but he kind of does it anyway.
It feels like something he's supposed to say, but he doesn't really believe.
Right, but he never really says anything either. He just kind of tries to kiss her or be close to her, but he doesn't say like, you should leave my brother and come away with me. Like, he doesn't actually say what he wants, because you're right, I don't think he quite knows how to define or verbalize his desires. Versus in the way that the creature can't either.
Yeah, versus the intensity of what they feel for each other.
Yeah, right.
Which is so much less certain, but also much more intense.
Right, it's very easy for the creature to say, why did you make me? I hate you.
I think there are other kind of tip of the hat moments here that show how both of these men are broken by this relationship with the other. During his kind of farmhouse exile, when the creature's observing this family and the blind man, and we hear his voiceover narration where he's talking about how he wants to be accepted by these people, how he wants to, yes, be part of a family finally, but he says he wants to be their, quote, benefactor. And I thought that was such an interesting word to use, because that reminds me explicitly of the Faustus-Mephistopheles relationship, where it's all about what can you provide me?
Right, it's almost contractual or transactional.
Yes, totally. It's a business term. And I love this so much because this is your character who was introduced as a Faustus. and then spends the rest of the movie possibly also being a Mephistopheles, acting like Harlander. Because Harlander is absolutely Victor's benefactor. Harlander is maybe the most simple character in the movie. He's the Mephistopheles is Mephistopheles. He's the double Mephistopheles. It's interesting to have the introduced perfect Faustus character in the creature evoking the double Mephistopheles. Like, it's so doubled. There's so much. I mean, honestly, we could spend 3 more hours just doing this forever, because really, there is that depth within this script. There's so much here. The way that the creature understands and observes this family only using the language of this fucked up relationship he has with Victor. He's talking about the hunter, the wolf, the sheep, all of this inevitable violence between people. That's exclusively shaped by the experience he had being tormented in the basement by Victor. And even then, in the finale, when Victor continuously calls the creature his son, where he's trying to finally settle. He's trying to say, okay, I'll just be the Mephistopheles now. Maybe that's how I can make sense of this strange and ever-changing world. I love the way Del Toro shoots that moment, because the creature's standing through, I guess, the whole movie and the whole framing device. He's hulking, he's gigantic, he's in this massive cloak where he's taking up half of this ship's cabin. And he's looking down on Victor, who's broken and old and hobbled and kind of
laying down,
recoiling up. So in the moment where Victor is trying to finally settle in one of these identities, and he keeps calling the creature son, he's basically in a cradle looking up at him.
Oof, yeah.
They can't settle into one role. The moment he decides to finally be a father, Del Toro makes sure he only looks like a newborn baby. It's there's just so much here. I can't remember the last time I saw a movie with this much text and subtext and clarity and thematic depth. That's really all I have for the Faustus thing. I genuinely, I had to stop myself, because this is so fractal. This is so kaleidoscopic. I just cannot compliment enough how Del Toro visualized and deepened the Faustian history of Frankenstein.
It is really amazing. I love this analysis. I think this helps me. I mean, I appreciated the movie so much after seeing it, but I feel like I appreciate it even more. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about in the movie, like one of the things that has just stuck with me the most, is early on in the creature's life, the only word he can say is Victor. And Mia Goth's character says, she points out to Victor, because he's like expressing how frustrating that is. And she says, it could be that Victor is his entire world. Like, that is all he knows and understands is you. You are all he has. And I think even as the story goes on and Victor actively escapes, and the creature actively escapes Victor and learns other words and tries to make connections with other people, he cannot escape Victor, and Victor continues to rule the creature's entire world and existence, and that never goes away. And then I think also, when he is learning to say Victor, he's sort of, he's copying Victor by like gesturing at himself and calling himself Victor a little bit too, in the same way that many fathers name their sons after them. And so I think that duality is present in that complicated relationship with that name as well.
It's such an emotional script. It's such a romantic script, and for a story that is defined by its body horror and its violence, whether you see him digging up graves or electrocuting corpses,
sewing the pieces together,
and we see a good amount of violence and gore here. I mean, it's not Terrifier, but we see some stuff here.
There's a lot of blood and body parts in this movie.
But the most affecting and agonizing moments are all emotional.
Certainly,
it's such a sweeping, romantic, sensitive script. I was really kind of bowled over by it. If we can move on to our second subject or segment here, I want to talk about structure for a segment. And this point kind of has a punchline, but I want to build to it.
Okay.
And the goal for me is that you get there before I say the name of the movie.
Oh, because you've got a comparison.
Yes.
Okay.
So this can be kind of the game for those playing at home, meaning everyone else in the world but me.
Write down your timestamp in the video of where you figure it out. We have no way to fact check you, so.
I was so impressed by how the story was structured, because like we just explored for half an hour, there are so many reversals, echoes, callbacks. There can be almost a delirious complexity to this story.
The book is the same way, because it's letters within letters within stories within letters. Yeah, it's messy.
And I love that Del Toro Toro anchors this with these title cards. He anchors the film within 2 numbered chapters. We get Victor's story and the creature's story. And even though they constantly overlap and intersect, and they're almost kind of color-coded different, for one of them being in the Arctic and the other one being in, big, swoopy, beautiful, not Victorian, but old-timey, beautiful cities, they're almost coded that way with these 2 numbered chapters. And both characters ultimately, both perspectives, both POVs, both leads of the movie, get voiceover authority, even as their stories become more and more subjective and somehow unreliable as we learn more about them. And both characters get hobbled and ultimately lose. The reputations, their lives are destroyed throughout the movie. I realized right before the credits hit that this felt so much like Oppenheimer.
Oh.
Victor's story and the creature's story is fusion and fission. All of that timeline hopping throughout the structure of this movie reminded me of that same delirious complexity in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, where we get, between Oppenheimer and Strauss, we get these 2 incomplete POVs with dueling narration and objectivity and subjectivity and voiceover privileges as they pursue this impossible, forbidden task. If you looked at what Victor's trying to do and what Oppenheimer's trying to do, they're these central existential projects that spiral out, and you see them lose control of this Herculean Promethean power.
They're both Prometheus stories. Frankenstein is called Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Oppenheimer's story, the book about him, is called American Prometheus. That's beautiful.
And you see them totally spin out, lose control, get defeated, and possibly end the world.
Yeah, and are punished for all eternity. That's fantastic.
You buy it?
I do, because I was thinking about Oppenheimer because of the Prometheus connection. And I was thinking, the Oppenheimer, we just recently resaw Oppenheimer in theaters. They were showing it for, I guess, an anniversary screening. I don't know, who cares? It was awesome every time.
It was on film, too.
Yeah,
Wasn't it 70
millimeter? I think it was 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
And, the movie opens with this statement about Prometheus saying he stole fire from the gods, and as punishment, he was chained to a rock for eternity. And Frankenstein is also a Prometheus story where Dr. Frankenstein has done a very similar thing.
And Harlander name drops Prometheus in that initial meeting in the laboratory.
Yes. Okay, I missed that, I guess. I was, at the very beginning of the movie, I was a little sleepy.
No, there was a line about him getting burned when he was trying to entice him into accepting Harlander as his patron.
Okay, got it. But so I was thinking about that a lot, and sort of both these stories are sweeping epic narratives that take place over many, many years and are about one person, but are also very much about many other people and sort of the complex layers of people's actions and the consequences of those. And I'm if you're thinking about fusion and fission, right? I'm thinking about Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Strauss.
Yeah.
Not that we need to directly map, but it's interesting. I kind of feel like, I can't think of Christoph Waltz's character. Harlander. I keep wanting to say Harbinger. I feel like Harlander could be our Strauss here. I feel like, because there's almost because Strauss is older than Oppenheimer, but he sort of has power over him in terms of seniority, but also feels very jealous and resentful of him at the same time. And they have a very tense, fraught relationship. So I think there's some similar mapping onto there.
It's an interesting task, isn't it, with the character mapping? Because I'm as tempted to say that the creature is Strauss as I am to say that the creature is the atomic bomb.
Right. That's
you could go either way.
And interestingly, both of these stories really are what happens when you do too much science.
Totally.
Don't take it too far. And on the one hand, it's this mythological, demon summoning story. And on the other hand, it's about science and technology and the fear of too much progress and the implications of that and the existential things that come with it. That's a really interesting connection. I love that.
Before we move on to our next segment about directorial style, Maggie, if people were really enjoying this episode and they wanted to get way more episodes of us, where would they go?
Ooh, you know what? I would send them to our Patreon. We have Patreon, folks. It is $2 a month. And for that low price, you can get 2 bonus episodes every single month. We put out 2 episodes. I just said it. I'm going to say it again. Every single month. It's just painted myself into a corner there. Over there, we talk about all sorts of things. If you're new to our channel, our show, we don't just talk about horror. We talk about a lot of things.
Mostly horror and fantasy.
But yeah, mostly horror and fantasy. But our Patreon has a wide selection. The most that we have over there is our Breakfast Buffet series, where we talk about a roundup of movies or TV shows or books or albums or all sorts of other works of art.
In conversation with each other.
Exactly.
So it'll be 3 or more works of art and how they talk to each other. The same way we just did with Frankenstein and Faustus.
But sometimes it's other things. Sometimes it's like a tier ranking of fantasy movies, and sometimes it's
chapter by chapter through the source material for House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
The George R. R. Martin Fire and Blood book.
God,
There's a lot over there.
There's a lot over there. Anyway, you can check it out. The link is in the description. Of course, by joining the Patreon, you can access everything that's been put out before, and of course, get those 2 new ones every month. Thank you very much for your support.
Moving on to our next segment, I want to talk about just the look of the thing. This is an incredibly gorgeous film.
I know, like going into the movie, I was like, okay, I'm nervous because this story is really hard to adapt. Yeah. Like I've honestly never seen a good adaptation of Frankenstein. I mean, I've seen ones that are all right and ones that I enjoy, but didn't feel like good adaptations. And then also, I haven't seen a lot of Guillermo Del Toro, but the other movie of his I'm most familiar with is Crimson Peak. Beautiful movie. Not very good. Like the story is not my favorite. The script is not my favorite. I love watching that movie, but I don't think it's a very great movie. I was nervous that's what this was going to be, and it wasn't. But I mean, it's still like, because it was great, but it also did deliver on the amazing costumes and sets, and just the overall look of the movie was beautiful, and I knew it was going to be, and that was really exciting to see.
So because you haven't seen most of his movies, which is totally fine, what did this remind you of visually? Are there any other directors' styles? Because I caught 2 in particular, or maybe 3, that I just wanted to see where you landed.
I mean, it felt very almost like a fantasy film in the way it was directed.
Well,
like
he was supposed to do The Hobbit, remember?
Well, exactly.
Okay.
And like there are elements of horror in this for sure. Obviously, Frankenstein is a horror story, but it's also told in this very fantastical way. And all of his movies feel very fantastical. So this felt like a really well-directed fantasy movie. And I mean, Alexander Desplat did the score. And then also
of this,
yeah,
really?
I looked it up. Yeah.
Oh,
Alexander which is why it was like so good, right? And then of course Guillermo del Toro had Kate Hawley as the costume designer, who also did the Crimson Peak costumes. She does gorgeous costumes, but she also did costume work on the Hobbit movies. And so there's a lot of like fantasy crossover. The Hobbit movies, the costumes are great. You just made a face. They're great. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I like the Hobbit movies.
Okay. Yeah, you do. Then why'd you make a face?
To entertain you.
Well, it's just thrown me off.
Well, silly me.
Anyway, so no, I don't have a particular director it reminded me of, but it felt almost like a fantasy story in the way that it was presented.
I mean, what I'm going to say might sound kind of surface level, but I think there's more to dig into here.
Okay.
I think this film almost visually felt like Del Toro was the third leg of the stool alongside Tim Burton and Robert Eggers.
Oh, Tim Burton, of course.
So just to kind of walk that point out a little bit, for the Eggers comparison, I thought in the way that it depicted period, obviously it's not exactly the same country or period or anything, but with the lavishness, the sheer enthusiasm that it had for the period, it reminded me of my favorite parts of Nosferatu.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot more style in Guillermo del Toro and not strict adherence to historical accuracy the way that Eggers does, but I see what you mean. There's definitely like a love for the period.
Yes. Yeah. The way that it portrayed and then explored the lab reminded me so much of The Lighthouse.
Yes.
The whole sequence of the creature in exile around the farmhouse as this kind of ghost watching this family reminded me a lot of The Witch.
Yeah.
And I thought the violence really reminded me of how it felt in Nosferatu when there was blood. It was such a dark, such a cold, such a blue film that the blood felt so shocking and dirty and unfamiliar.
And even the hulking presence of your monstrous villain in a
cloak.
big cloak. That reminded me of Nosferatu and with the creature here.
And Tim Burton, it kind of brought me back to the glory days of Tim Burton, because we were lucky enough to grow up when he was at his prime. And I felt so much Sleepy Hollow here. In the, specifically within Ichabod Crane character, in the kind of goofy gonzo medical fantasy.
Yes.
With all the silly instruments, and he's wearing the pince nez and all the silly glasses and the weird tools and knives.
There's less humor here, but yeah, there's. I mean, they're in the same category, Guillermo Del Toro and Tim Burton.
Oh, sure, at peak Tim Burton.
Yes,
because I think there's a lot of Sweeney Todd here as well.
Yeah.
In tone, in blood, in grime and subterfuge.
In the puffy white shirts.
But to pull it back to Sleepy Hollow for a second, I do think there's a bit of that comedy here. Because and I don't mean this as an insult, because I think Oscar Isaac does like profound work in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think his accent, I think he's going for something a little bit schmaltzy and campy. I don't think he's going for pure accuracy of a British accent.
Right. I think he's being a little like melodramatic, because the character is dramatic. The character is self-obsessed and romanticizing everything in his life, and it's the romantic poets. I mean, he's a Lord Byron, right? Like, but the mad scientist version. So I think that accent work makes total sense.
And I saw a quote from Del Toro talking about how he dressed and styled Victor, and he said he was more inspired by like rock stars than he was surgeons.
Yeah.
And I think there's a similar performance in the Ichabod Crane character, where in both cases you have these non-British actors doing British accents, but going for something else, going for style. And there was a moment where Victor was talking and the melodrama of his accent reminded me a little of Stewie Griffin from Family Guy. In the same way, there are moments of total pompous goofiness in the Ichabod Crane performance from Johnny Depp in Sleepy Hollow.
That's funny.
I thought that was I wasn't expecting that kind of corollary there.
Yeah, I mean, you could even maybe to bring it back to not necessarily Robert Eggers, but to the Dracula story. The hat that Victor wears looks so much like a Van Helsing hat. Like, that's all I could think of was Van Helsing. Like, because I was like, I was like, that's such a weird hat. But it wasn't out of place in the movie. But it felt singular. It felt like he's trying to stand out because he is so dramatic and self-obsessed.
And for this kind of movie, especially so soon after Nosferatu doing so well, I think those are the two clearest cultural touchstones for a work like this, being Tim Burton and Robert Eggers. But throughout the movie, I was much more frequently reminded of Gore Verbinski, and particularly what he did in the first Pirates movie. I think it started because the first thing we see is from the framing device of the ship and the naval captain. And so much of the first Pirates is on boats. And it was the color that he lent to that. When I think of Gore Verbinski and how he directed those pirate films, I think of color. Almost color washes.
They're so rich and saturated and like juicy. And this movie feels like that too. I think that's why I said it reminded me of like a fantasy movie.
Yes.
Because a lot of coloring in fantasy tends to be very rich and bold in a way that something like Tim Burton is not. It's like intentionally heavily desaturated and cold. And this is much livelier. And I liked that.
And when the creature is in that kind of farmhouse exile, the part of the house that he's hiding in, that workshop, looked so much like the blacksmith shop from the first Pirates.
Yes.
Where we meet Orlando Bloom with the donkey running in circles. It reminded me so much of that set. And then to go to the finale of the film, it reminded me of how Pirates 1 wraps up, where the great drama of the film is the living and the dead. Can they coexist? This person's dead. We see the skeleton, but he's still sword fighting, to the point that the film almost recedes into monochrome. Whoever is being hit by the moonlight is instantly reduced to black and white. It's all the drama of the living and the dead and how starkly pale these characters can look. I mean, that was the whole arc of this film, was losing that beautiful, lavish color of the period as we drift towards the Arctic and these guys' horrible deaths.
I even thought the way that at the beginning, when it's like one of the first times you see the creature, you find out later he's been like shot at and seriously injured, but the bones of two of his fingers are poking out of his hand because the skin's been torn off. Yeah. And that reminded me a lot of the way the skeletons are rendered in the Pirates movies, especially the moment when Johnny Depp is sort of twiddling the medallion between his skeleton fingers. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. And then I never really thought about Pirates again. But I think that's interesting that we both kind of clocked those just visual little cues in your brain that you don't really consciously think about, but you see it and your brain goes, oh, Gore Verbinski. It's funny.
Totally.
It's funny.
While we're on this note of particularly the visual elements and design of the film, I wanted to talk about creature design. And you and I haven't discussed this, but What did you think of the way the creature was rendered? Noting, before we get into it, that obviously heavily inspired by Bernie Wrightson and all of that work in the comics, to the point that Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi both had printed out panels of Bernie Wrightson's renditions of the creature in their trailers, in their apartments, all over. And to the point that Bernie Wrightson is credited in the credits of the film as inspiring the look of this character, which is amazing. Just Del Toro continuing to pay fealty to beautifully stylized work in the world of comics, because of course he did 2 Hellboy movies, which is honoring Mike Mignola, who's one of the other most stylized and influential creators in that space. So with that kind of acknowledgement, what did you think of the creature design here?
This is one of my favorite Frankenstein creature renderings that I've seen. It feels simultaneously accurate and possible while also terrifying and fantastical. I thought he looked even better once his hair had grown out. I mean, it makes sense that he didn't have hair when he's first born, so that makes sense. But once he was sort of, I don't know, fully realized with his hair grown out, I thought it was excellent. The skin was really creepy, and I liked that he always had wounds that didn't quite heal, but he could also heal at the same time. There were only a couple moments where I could tell, oh, that's just prosthetic skin and it's just on top of his skin.
Did that bother you?
Only a little bit, and it really only bothered me because I had heard in an interview that it took them 11 hours to get him into that makeup, and I thought, what are you doing for 11 hours? But like, just thinking about, there are moments where I was like, I can tell that is not him, and
it's
that is
full body transformation.
No,
I'm surprised
I understand.
they could do it that quickly.
And I just mean that I felt like there were some parts, like on his shoulders especially, that felt like, I feel like I'm just seeing puffy prosthetics placed on top of his skin and painted over. But for the most part, I thought the overall design excellent. I liked the way that his makeup was done on his face. My only complaint really is that Jacob Elordi is too good looking to play the creature. I think they need someone a little weirder looking.
But in a script that is defined, I mean, I think as we've established so far, by its romantic sensibility.
Sure.
I think having one of the most beautiful people alive play this role, which is the character is a victim of such violence, most of the brutal violence in this brutal film is directed towards the most vulnerable creature.
Yes.
In the book, the creature is himself much more violent and villainous. And I think it's an interesting, again, kind of thoughtful choice to pull back on a lot of that, because I love the way Jacob Elordi played this, because
he did great. It wasn't like I didn't like him in the role. He was excellent. I was just, the whole time I was like, wow, he's got such a good looking face.
Well, I think he was incredible, but he also, I mean, he kills a bunch of people. He kills like half the sailors.
Kills a lot of people, yeah.
But I mean that we feel bad for him so much more than we don't. And absolutely. I think that is a tipping of the scale compared to the original source text. But I was reminded of Jacob Elordi's work in Saltburn, which we did an episode on, which we loved so much. I will stand by that film forever.
Yeah, me too.
But he's so gorgeous. He's so idealized in that film. He is the object of fascination, of obsession, of lust, he's coveted throughout the film by basically every other character. I loved the sallow look of his skin here, that it was artificially pale. It didn't just look dead. It looked, with such a beautiful body and face, it looked literally statuesque. It looked like marble. Not just that he was fit and almost David-like in some of the contortions he had for his body, but that the actual color and texture of the skin looked like stone.
That's fair. And I think there's definitely, you could make a strong case that Victor would choose a face that is beautiful compared to one that isn't, because you see him going through all the different bodies and trying to find the exact correct, he's trying to create this like ideal creature, right? This ideal person. He doesn't even think of it as a creature in his ideation of this plan. And so I think him selecting beautiful features makes a lot of sense. It's just a little counter to what we expect.
Yes.
But that's also not a bad thing. It's just, I thought everybody has a picture in their head of what the monsters should look like. And mine isn't Boris Karloff, but it's something a little bit harder to look at, you know, because as frightening as he is in the look that they've designed, I'm not that afraid of him. Just like if I saw him on the street, I'd be like, oh, why is that really hot guy wearing weird makeup, you know? So that's sort of why I thought of it that way, but I totally understand that choice.
And I think that level of beauty is almost immediately or maybe unavoidably objectified. So it's interesting that you have this kind of peak of the male form, but Victor will only ever refer to the creature as it, not him. So he's, almost from another angle, he's doing that objectification. And he's created this beautiful object.
This thing that he can play with and control and manipulate rather than a human being who he's created.
And it's so idealized that he can't see it as human. I thought that was an interesting kind of touch of commentary there.
I did like how his eyes glowed. I thought that was a really excellent addition, and it wasn't always there, but it was like they glowed in the same way that like a cat's eyes will glow at night, and I thought that was awesome.
The shadows utilized in this film, the darkness, the way he played with Oscar Isaac's face with all the different ages. Again, the aging reminded me of Oppenheimer and how you have young Cillian Murphy with the big bouncy hair, and then you age him. Here, what they did with the beard. We haven't talked about it, but Oscar Isaac was as incredible as Jacob Elordi was here. Yeah. To move on to just kind of closing thoughts here, my prevailing takeaway is this is what I wanted out of Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Because, and I know we might have different takes on this, but for me, this is the perfect combination of boundless, bold style and equally fathomless thematic depth. That, to boot, for me, is also endlessly steeped in Doctor Faustus.
Sure.
Where it's not only that this is a tremendous film, I think it is a thoughtful, romantic, brutal, brilliant adaptation of the work. And it makes me not just want to go revisit this film later, but also enthusiastically, tripping at the finish line, makes me want to go back to the book.
Yes.
And that's the greatest compliment to the adaptation and the source material.
That's exactly how I felt too. And like I said, I've immediately started re-listening to the book because I haven't revisited it in a long time. And yeah, this was definitely the best adaptation that I've ever seen of this book. Like I said earlier, this book is really, I think, really hard to adapt because it's complex and it's layered. And how do you visualize the creature? Because I think so much of it is meant to be sort of in your own imagination, and there's so many like layers of narrative and storytelling and framing. And I don't know, I've always found other adaptations to be really faltering or lacking in an important area. But I agree. I think this captured the feeling and the ideas of the book so well, while also being this fabulous visual spectacle. No, this was really excellent. And we were both nervous. We were kind of prepared for it to not be good. We were like, you know what? We'll go in and look at some pretty images and that'll be it. But actually it was excellent. And I really, really liked it.
Frankenstein is in theaters right now, and it'll be available on Netflix November 7th, I believe.
Yes.
And I saw today it is confirmed to be getting a physical release.
Oh, great. Well,
Fantastic.
We will be purchasing. That's excellent. I'm surprised Netflix is okay with that. Wow.
I don't know.
Well, don't jinx it, knock on wood.
He seems to be able to have strong-armed them into everything he wanted. I guess winning Best Picture will do that a little bit.
That'll help you, yeah.
Being able to get the extended theatrical release for a streaming movie and the physical release, that's everything.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. I'm so glad that this movie was able to be made and that it's as wonderful as it is. Let us know what you thought of Frankenstein. Let us know what you think of Frankenstein adaptations, of Faust stories, of Guillermo Del Toro's directing style, of the framing device, of our connections with Oppenheimer, anything we talked about. If you're on YouTube, you can comment down below and keep the conversation going. If you're listening on a podcast platform, you can send us an email, secondbreakfastpod. Speaking of connecting with us, have you heard of Lemon Tarts in Space? This is Cam's latest book, Lemon Tarts in Space. It is a light sci-fi dark comedy. It is Alien meets Romulus, Maggie. It is Alien meets Monty Python. It is Friday the 13th meets Flubber. It is so funny, but also moving and sad and beautiful all at once. You can read it as a regular novel, or you can check out the fully produced audio drama, which is really, really fun to listen to.
It's also all about duality.
It absolutely, and it's a duo. Yeah, it's 100% about duality.
Everything happens at least twice.
Yeah. Listen, there are themes that Cam loves, and it's very apparent in his book. So go check that out. The links for that are in the description. Thank you very much for listening to this. Thank you for joining us for our ongoing Summerween series. I know it's the end of October, but honey, it's still hot down here. But we are wrapping up our Summerween series
on Halloween.
This Friday on Halloween, and I know we keep hyping it, but oh my God, it's going to be such a good episode.
It's a humdinger.
It's not going to be. I know it is because we already recorded it.
Yes,
but
we did.
It's excellent. So please stay tuned. Check us and come back and visit us on Halloween. Let us know what you thought. Like, subscribe, etc. We'll catch you here in just a few days with another brand new episode.